both regiments on this festive season, and it's good to see so many soldiers, friends and the odd enemy amongst the people here today. I stand here a humble person, as a third generation member of the Household Division and a second generation lifeguard. The study as Regimental Corps Major is one of the proudest days of my life to stand here and introduce this brick hanging this year. And another proud moment is to introduce you to the brick hanger. And Major Mark Kingston this year will hang the brick, and I choose this person because Mark taught me a thing or two when he was a 3-bar. I returned back from Knightsbridge, having been quite a good disciplinarian, shall I say, but he taught me that you have to have a bit of humility about you and how to get respect from people, and I appreciate that from him, and I share this celebration with him today, and thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, tradition dictates that I give you a brief overview of the history of brick hanging before I actually conduct the brick hanging ceremony. And it's a tradition that goes back to 1889 and was in fact a second lifeguard tradition. The second lifeguards had recently moved into the barracks here at Hyde Park. They were completely different barracks to what they are today. Many of the things worked in the barracks back then, perhaps they don't today. The second lifeguards came from the cavalry barracks at Hounslow in about 1888. They arrived here. Some came from cavalry barracks Hounslow, and some actually came from the Spitalfields, which is where Combermere Barracks is situated today. Amongst those that were here with the second lifeguards at that time was an individual called Mr. Joe Holland. Now, Mr. Joe Holland was the forage master, and he was a civilian, but nevertheless he carried a great deal of authority, within the regiment. From the research that I've carried out, it would seem that Joe was a very jovial chap. He was quite avuncular, very friendly, similar in many ways perhaps to previous forage masters like Paddy Haddon. maybe not. The Christmas of 1889, the corporal's mess as it was then, of course, met for pre-Christmas holiday drinks, and Joe, being a senior man amongst the regiment, was invited. Now, on his way to the mess, and he was arriving late because he'd been selling some forage, on his way to the mess he was stopped by the commanding officer at the time, which was a chap called Colonel Townsend. And Colonel Townsend invited Joe up to his quarters for a glass or two of sherry. Now, Joe was quite frustrated by this, because actually what he wanted to do was join the boys in the mess and sing some serious ale. But thought, best policy here, I better go off with the commanding officer and have some sherry with him. He then said to the commanding officer, and this is annotated in records, Colonel Sir, please wait. I need to go down to the horse lines and check on the horses before I come up to your office for sherry and whatever else was on offer. And the colonel said yes, okay, fine. So off the colonel went, and Joe then proceeded to go to the guard room. The guard room wasn't situated where he is now. It was actually situated by where the ceremonial gates were. Anyway, Joe went to the guard room, and left over from the rebuild that had just finished was a pile of cornerstones, and these cornerstones were small sort of brick type stones that were sort of used to sort of wedge in the corners of the buildings that they put up. And Joe picked up one of these cornerstones. He called the corporal of the guard out, and he said to the corporal of the guard, I want you to contact the mess and tell the mess that they are not to close, and then at that stage threw the cornerstone onto the roof of the guard room and said, I don't want you to close the mess until that brick comes off of the roof. Joe then proceeded to go to the commanding officer's office and drank sherry and mulled wine and all those good things, and had so much that actually he felt a bit worse for wear. So Joe then went to his billet and fell asleep. He then woke up in the early hours of the morning of that Thursday, because it was traditionally that brick hanging was carried out on a Thursday. The second Thursday, in fact, of December. And Joe fell asleep, woke up in the early hours of the morning, and realised what he had done. He thought, my gosh, I wonder if the mess is still open. So he put on his togs, ran straight to the mess, and sure enough, the mess was still open, and the brick still remained on the guardroom roof. So, this is where the tradition of brick hanging comes from, and we still maintain that tradition today. So it gives me great honour now to carry out the brick hanging ceremony, but before I do, I'd just like to thank the Regimental Corps Major and all the here gathered today for this great honour and great privilege that you bestowed for me. So thank you very much indeed. And without further ado, I'm going to balance on this piece of wood and hang the brick. Incidentally, the tray that we found, in fact this is down to Court Horse Wire, is the original tray that was used in 1889. It's the original tray, second lifeguard tray. It didn't have the legs back then, but that's a piece of history. Right, now I'm going to balance on this bit of wood.
For safety.
I'm okay. Well done. Ladies and gentlemen, the brick is well and truly hung.
Hey!